In this video, we're talking normal vision and what it should mean to you as an optician. Hey, I'm Sean Lassard from Modern Optician, where we help student opticians achieve their career goals through books, study guides, and video resources just like this one. So if you see value in this video, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications to make sure you don't miss any of our weekly videos as they drop. All right, let's jump into the presentation about normal vision. All right, guys, here we are in the presentation about normal vision. Now, before we get started, little bit of background information here about normal vision. This is a topic that I find many students struggle with without actually realizing it. I mean, the overall principle behind normal vision is not that complicated. And we're going to go through a couple slides here that show kind of what most people think of normal vision. And it's a very layman approach. Now, as an optician, the expectation here should be that you have a very thorough knowledge of what it means to have normal vision and exactly the link between anatomy and optics that actually allows that to happen. And as we move on in these slides, you're going to start to notice that this concept of normal vision is actually more of a theoretical one than a practical one, because there's so many different places where vision can go wrong, straying from that normal status. So yeah, let's get into it and see exactly what this is all about. And before we fully get into the lecture, don't forget, if you need help with your opticianry goals and getting ready for board exams and anything else, make sure to check modernoptician.com, where we have loads of books, study guides, and other resources to help you in your adventure through opticianry. In this particular case, the study guides for apprentice opticians, the workbook series, is by far the best way to kind of get a grasp on all the different concepts that we're talking about in these video lectures. And in this particular case, you can follow along pretty closely with the normal vision pages within workbook 1 of ocular anatomy. Anyways, like I said, modernoptician.com if you want to check these things out. And all these books are actually available in paperback form on Amazon as well. All right, let's jump into the slides. All right, so let's jump into normal vision. You'll see here in the title that I've kind of put normal vision in quotation marks, and I'm going to explain a little bit more as to why I did that in a second. But as far as most opticianry students go, and you know, the general consensus of normal vision is if you have the eye, and of course when you're looking in the distance and you have parallel rays of light coming to the eye, they will be converged right to the retina, and that forms a stable image. Now, this is a concept and an image that you're going to see all over in different textbooks and different study materials. And this is pretty much, you know, what the general consensus in the field is about what normal vision is. And of course, if all these things are satisfied, then what that implies is that the patient will be able to see 20/20. Now, in my adventures and consulting and teaching students, I've found that for the majority of students, this is where it ends. This is basically their concept of normal vision. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with this. However, it's pretty basic, and it doesn't really take into account what is happening within the eye and why it achieves normal vision. And as well, it doesn't really show you how easily things can go wrong at different steps of this overall process that all of a sudden turn the situation from normal to abnormal. So just wanted you to take a look at what, you know, the general consensus is on normal vision, and also to kind of give you a little bit of a hint that this is not enough. We need to know a little bit more detail about where normal vision comes from. So in the next slide, we're going to take a peek at exactly what I mean by this. All right, here we are, and here's where it gets a little more hairy and where you can start to see where all these different things come from. So I'm going to try to stay in a bit of a linear fashion here, but try to follow along as we kind of go through. I'm going to pull out my little highlighter tool here so that I can kind of direct you along the way. So first things first, we see here that, you know, normal distance vision, kind of like what we alluded to in the first slide, is basically characterized by parallel rays of light hit the eye and is converged to the retina. And this is basically your general premise of normal vision. Now, one thing that I want to be able to outline here is that normal vision is not just normal distance vision, but also normal near vision. So in order to be able to achieve normal near vision, we know that the focal length of the eye has to change, because the near object now no longer will project parallel rays of light to the eye, but it's actually going to project diverging rays of light. So if you have a little bit of a difficult time understanding that, it'd be good to kind of review your principles of optics. However, the closer the object is, the more narrow this converging light will be. And as a matter of fact, the principles of optics kind of state, the principles of version state that the further the light, or the reflected light comes off of an object, the more and more it becomes parallel as it gets further away from that object. But you see here in this example, if we're a quarter of a meter away from the eye, we're still very much in a divergent pattern here. So the optics of the eye have to change in order to be able to converge that light onto the retina. And you see here in an unaccommodated crystalline lens that the eye is actually not able to converge the rays of light, and the image forms behind the retina. So what happens? Well, if we know a little bit about ocular anatomy, we know that the eye is able to accommodate, to increase its refractive power through the crystalline lens, and then all of a sudden now we have more converging power that allows the light to be converged onto the retina and the image to be formed. So remember, when we're talking about normal vision, not only is it what we discussed about distance vision being perfectly clear in the sense that the eye is able to converge on the retina, we also have to assume that the eye has normal accommodative ability and can actually process near vision as well. Now, the way that this is accomplished, or as far as the things that need to be satisfied in order for this to be accomplished, have a lot to do with the optics of the eye. Now, one of the models that you should be familiar with and that you should use is the reduced or schematic eye. You might even hear it called the Gulfstran's eye due to the scientists that kind of discovered all these different values. However, this basically reduces the eye into a series of lenses and different refractive medium that have different properties, such as curvature and refractive indices, as you see here, and separation. So we know about lens systems in optics that there's a few different things that are going to impact how lenses affect light. First, you have the refractive index. Second, you have how far the object or the different lenses are from each other. And then you have the power, the curvature of the lens. So basically, the reduced eye created a model for normal vision where all of these things should be satisfied in pretty close to this, at least in order to create the optics required for normal vision. So why don't we kind of demonstrate this in the sense of the eye diagram. So you see here that, or at least we know that the major refractive components of the eye are the cornea and the crystalline lens. And as a matter of fact, important to realize too that the aqueous humor, the vitreous body, these all have refractive indices that also contribute to light. However, this is not nearly as big of a contributor to the refraction of light as the cornea and the crystalline lens. But notice how the cornea resembles very much a plus lens, and it's a very strong plus lens. It's 42 diopters. And in the crystalline lens is kind of like a biconvex lens that's about 20 diopters. And of course, the next part of the kind of equation here is where the image needs to be formed. So distance between these things, between the start of the lens system and the back of the lens system, is about 23.5 millimeters. And of course, there's separation between these lenses as well that are important as far as achieving all the optics that we're looking for here. So as you can see, our parallel rays of light as they enter the system, if all these things are satisfied, if you have somewhere in the neighborhood of 42 diopters, about 20 diopters for the crystalline lens, and about an axial separation of about 23.5 millimeters, all of these things are achieved. However, there are so many opportunities for things to go wrong here. What if the cornea is a little bit of a different power, a little bit of a different curvature? If you know anything about ocular anatomy, you know that not everybody has a 42 diopter cornea. Sometimes it's much flatter, sometimes it's much steeper. And the other thing too is not everybody has a 23.5 millimeter axial length for their eye. So it's pretty precise as far as what needs to happen here in order for normal vision to occur. So this is where I wanted you to really realize that this concept of normal vision, as far as from optics standpoint, is a pretty unique thing as far as the likelihood of this being able to all come together. Now, keep in mind that there are different versions of normal vision here, where if the power of the cornea is different, but the axial length is the right length to be able to match that new lens system, then normal vision can still be achieved. So keep that in mind, and we're going to look through a couple different things in this lecture as far as what can affect normal vision. But as far as the optics go, there's a lot of different working parts here that can contribute to whether vision is normal or abnormal. All right, so now that we've talked about the optics of normal vision and how this lens system kind of operates and contributes to this concept, why don't we take a look at the anatomy of normal vision? And we're going to throw a little bit of optics in there as well. And you might start to realize as I go through this that I'm not a huge advocate of normal vision because there's so many different places where it can go wrong. And it's basically, like I said, more of a conceptual thing than a practical thing. So first we're going to set this up by setting up our diagram of the eye again. And I'm going to divide this into things that are good for normal vision and things that are bad for normal vision. And we're going to work our way through the different segments of the eye so you can kind of quickly put together that there's a lot of opportunity here for things to not go right. And we're going to do the link here of between optics and anatomy, because most of the time when we're talking about normal vision, we're referring to the optics of the eye, and we kind of stop thinking about what it means for the eye to be able to have normal vision due to good anatomy as well. So first things first, let's start with the cornea. So we know that in order to have normal vision, the cornea should have a curvature of about 42. So I put about 38 to 42 because those are still normal ranges. And we should have a clear cornea as well because it has to be transparent, it has to be detergescent, it has to basically suit all the optical principles so that light can be refracted through it. However, if those things are not satisfied, we can't necessarily anymore consider this normal vision. So, any kind of corneal pathology, edema, which is swelling of the cornea, any kind of scars from injury or, improper contact lens wear, neovascularization, etc. Any kind of corneal pathology will have a negative impact on normal vision. And what if the cornea is very steep or very flat, meaning the curvature is greater than 42 diopters or less than 38 diopters? This, again, will probably contribute to not normal vision. And moving on to the crystalline lens, we expect it to be clear and elastic, clear so that it has its good refractive properties, and elastic so that it can contribute to accommodation and near vision. However, what if the crystalline lens has pathology? What if the patient is presbyopic? What if we have cataracts? What if we have diabetic changes like index changes in the lens? These are all opportunities here to stray away from normal vision. Now we know that the axial length of the eye is supposed to be about 23.5 millimeters in normal vision. However, what if it's longer, or what if it's shorter? And as we're going to see in future lectures, if the axial length of the eye is longer than 23.5 millimeters, tends to contribute to myopia. And on the other side of the coin, if it goes shorter than 23.5 millimeters, often will contribute to hyperopia. So yet another opportunity to stray from normal vision. How about the retina? Healthy retina, healthy macula. This is where all the visual processing takes place. So normal vision assumes that there are no retinal pathologies. However, we know as opticians that retinal pathology is very common, and there's so many different types that can affect the status of normal vision. We can have age-related macular degeneration. We can have diabetic retinopathy. We have retinal holes, detachments, etc. There's so many different retinal problems that can once again detract from normal vision. And finally, the optic nerve is, the visual processing powerhouse of the eye, the link between the eye and the brain. And again, normal vision assumes that we have a healthy optic nerve. However, what if the patient has glaucoma, neuritis? What if they're a stroke victim and the neurological pathway is now damaged? What if there's been an injury? And there's so many other places where things can go wrong in the optic nerve. So as you can see, Though on the green side of this slide, we have all these perfect kind of situations that would contribute to normal vision. There are so many different places where this can go wrong, and every single one of these things will have a negative impact on vision in one way or another. Not all these things impact vision in the exact same way. However, if you add all of these together, and especially if a patient has more than one of these things happening all at once, we're straying further and further away from normal vision. A recap here, and we've titled this "Reason for Abnormal Vision." I know the main topic here is normal vision. However, it's kind of morphed into that, hasn't it? Basically talking about how normal vision being more of a concept, there's a lot more opportunity to have abnormal vision. And of course, not every single abnormality is going to have the same impact. And sometimes, the person can have performance that will resemble normal vision. Just because the person is seeing 20/20 doesn't necessarily mean they have normal vision, because 20/20, as far as Snellen acuity, basically will tell us a little bit about clarity and visual performance. However, we don't know about visual quality. We don't know if there's aberration. We don't know if the colors are dim. We don't know anything about the person's visual experience. So I wanted you to realize that though we look at normal vision in a certain kind of light, we always have to be thinking in the back of our minds that there are possibilities here that the person is not seeing as well as what they're performing on, let's say, like a Snellen acuity. So as we discussed, we touched a little bit on refractive error. Any kind of optical differences in the eye, as far as straying away from that schematic eye representation, can usually contribute to refractive errors such as myopia, hyperopia, astigmatism, presbyopia, all things that we're going to go into more detail in future lectures. And of course, there's the anatomical side, where any kind of pathology, from the cornea to the lens to the retina to the optic nerve, and even muscular, we didn't talk about things like strabismus that mess with the alignment of the eyes and the visual pathway. These can all have negative impacts on normal vision. And it's important to remember that different sources require different approaches, and as well that anything that strays from normal can have a negative impact on visual acuity, visual performance, and overall visual comfort. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture on normal vision, and of course make sure to stay tuned for future ones. All right, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this week's presentation on normal vision, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification icon so that you don't miss next week's lecture on myopia. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye now.